We're ready for cell respiration, part 1. Today we will look at energy harvesting, just an introduction to that topic. Our information today comes from the College Board AP Biology Framework Big Idea 2, which says that all living systems require a constant input of energy. More specifically, what we need to know and understand is that cellular respiration in eukaryotes involves a series of coordinated enzyme-catalyzed reactions that harvest free energy from simple carbohydrates. I want you to think about some questions as we get started with cellular respiration. They may at first seem really simple. In fact, you could probably give me a very general answer to these questions right now. For example, why do we have to eat? Another question to think about is, what does eating have to do with entropy? And a third question that I want you to think about is, why do you have to breathe? You might say that we eat because we're hungry, or we eat to fight entropy, or that we breathe so that we don't die. But by the time we're done with this unit, you'll be able to give an AP level answer to those questions. You'll be able to speak about the molecules involved and why this process of cell respiration is so important to the very basic and fundamental processes that keep us alive. Let's look at this molecule for a moment. You've seen it before, probably in your first biology course. There are things about it that you might recognize. You probably will remember its name. If you count the number of phosphate groups that are present, there's 1, 2, 3. A triphosphate group is present. Adenine and triphosphate, ATP. Adenosine triphosphate. This molecule is an important energy molecule, and we'll see during this unit on respiration that basically that's the purpose or the goal of respiration, is to tie the energy that is located in your food into the bonds of this molecule to try to get the energy captured in the bonds of these phosphate groups. So the molecule of interest in this unit on cellular respiration is going to be ATP. ATP is our cell's energy currency. This energy is released when a phosphate is removed from the molecule. So if I take one of the phosphate groups off, energy can be released. Now the process of cellular respiration fuels the addition of the phosphate back onto the molecule of ADP. That's basically the purpose of the process of respiration. Now this is not where our cells are going to store energy for the long haul, because this molecule is unstable and is really fitted only for short-term energy storage. Its energy power comes from the fact that it has these high energy bonds. And these high energy bonds, when they are broken, these bonds are able to release about 7.3 kilocalories per mole of energy. And so the energy is stored, and it's really a consequence of the electron configuration of this molecule. These 3 phosphate groups have a collective or a total of 4 negative charges. And that's confined in a relatively small area. And these charges repel each other, so it makes the potential energy of this molecule very high. The repulsion also weakens the bonds between these phosphate groups. So because this molecule has these weak bonds that are due to this attraction, this makes the molecule very unstable, which makes it good as a source of energy, because the bonds will break readily and release the energy that's found in them. And that energy then is used to do cellular work. You'll see that there's work called transport work. If something needs to be moved, let's say from one side of the membrane to another in a cell. So the transport work is one thing that your cells will spend their ATP on. Another would be mechanical work, like in a muscle as it contracts and we move a molecule from one position to another. And a third kind of work that your cells have to do would be chemical work. In this third type of work, the chemical work, ATP will phosphorylate key reactants in a variety of chemical reactions that occur in various metabolic pathways. All of this energy movement can ultimately be tracked back to light energy or solar energy, which was captured by chloroplast during the process of photosynthesis. The energy is stored as organic molecules, and then through respiration, these organic molecules are broken down and their energy moved into the bonds of ATP. The carbon and the water then are recycled and can be used again in the process of photosynthesis. So you'll see that carbon plays an important role in this energy transfer because the carbon dioxide is used in the formation of the organic molecules, which are then broken down. So next, let's look at the carbon cycle and its role in this process of energy transfer.
Could a carbon atom that was once part of Albert Einstein be in you? All living things need to take in carbon-containing molecules to fuel their activity and build their cells. This is true for busy students and for all organisms. Let's look at how carbon atoms move through the carbon cycle in the Arctic tundra. Carbon atoms from carbon dioxide are incorporated into living things by producers, such as this plant. Carbon dioxide enters a leaf, moves into a cell, and goes into a chloroplast. There, in the process of photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is used to make sugar molecules. The sugars can be used to build larger carbon-containing molecules, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. In this way, carbon that was in the air is now part of the plant. When a plant is eaten by an herbivore, or primary consumer, carbon in plant tissue enters the primary consumer's digestive system. There, plant molecules are broken down. These small molecules are then used by the primary consumer to make larger molecules for building its own tissues. In this way, some of the carbon that was in a plant becomes carbon in a primary consumer. Similarly, when a primary consumer is eaten by a higher-level consumer, some of the carbon in the primary consumer is incorporated into the higher-level consumer. Carbon-containing molecules in dead plant material, animal feces, and dead organisms are taken up by decomposers, such as fungi and bacteria. Decomposers break down these materials and incorporate some of the carbon atoms into their own bodies. We have now seen how carbon moves from carbon dioxide to producers, to primary consumers, to higher-level consumers, and to decomposers. How does carbon get back to the atmosphere? During cellular respiration, carbon-containing molecules are broken down, and ATP is made. Carbon dioxide is released as a byproduct and returned to the atmosphere by producers, consumers, and decomposers. Overall, this return of carbon dioxide by cellular respiration is closely balanced by its removal from the atmosphere through photosynthesis. The global carbon cycle involves living things on land and in rivers, lakes, and oceans. And, by the way, considering the huge number of carbon atoms in each person and how quickly carbon atoms move through the carbon cycle, there is almost certainly a little of Einstein in each of us.
Now that we've had a chance to think about the carbon cycle, let's look at some carbon-containing products. Pyruvate, a slice of bread, a molecule of ATP, glucose, and starch. I would like for you to find a spot on your notes somewhere and list those terms in order from greatest to least chemical energy. You may want to stop the video while you make your list. How does your list compare to this one? From greatest to least energy, we start with a slice of bread. That bread contains starch. which contains glucose, which can be broken down into pyruvate, which can then have that energy transferred to a molecule of ATP. So in order from greatest to least energy, here's the list. Yours probably matches exactly. Before we get into the details of how you could move energy from those kinds of compounds, let's revisit the principle of coupled oxidation and reduction reactions, fondly referred to as redox reactions. Do you know the oxidation number of hydrogen when it's in diatomic hydrogen? Well, it would be 0. All elements have oxidation numbers of 0, whether they are diatomic or not. Now the hydrogen in water would be a +1. So what's the oxidation number of oxygen in water? Be a -2. So if we look at the water molecule H2O, we'd see that you would need 2 hydrogens and only 1 oxygen because of those oxidation numbers to make water a neutral molecule. Oxidation and reduction reactions are important in the processes of energy transfer in many cellular processes, which include, of course, cellular respiration. So if we start with reduction, it will make more sense if you think about it first. If an element gains an electron, which has a negative charge, its oxidation number is reduced by 1 algebraically. The opposite of that would be true if a substance is oxidized. It's going to lose an electron, so its oxidation number increases by 1 algebraically. So remember that a substance that loses the electron is oxidized. A substance that is gaining electron is said to be reduced. There are mnemonics that you can remember, like oil rig, OILRIG, which translates into that oxidation is losing an electron and the molecule that is being reduced is gaining. So if we remember, oxidation is losing an electron and reduced is gaining an electron, then oil rig as the mnemonic will help you remember the difference between oxidation and reduction. Some redox reactions don't transfer electrons, but rather they change the electron distribution in covalent bonds. This is common in combustion reactions. The example you can see here is a reaction between methane and oxygen. The electron donor is called the reducing agent. Since it is itself oxidized, think oil, oxidation is loss of electrons, and the electron receptor is called the oxidizing agent, since it is itself reduced. Here's a biological example of where oxidation and reduction are important as we consider this formula for cellular respiration. Glucose is going to be oxidized. Remember, oxidized is losing electrons. So glucose loses electrons as carbon dioxide is formed. Oxygen, on the other hand, is going to be reduced. Reduced is gaining electrons as it forms water. So for this oxidation, we have a reduction that's going to occur. So these are coupled or paired reactions as we move through the process of cellular respiration. One place where redox reactions are important is in the electron transport or movement that's done by the electron carrier, NAD. NAD can accept electrons and be reduced to NADH plus H, and that is a reversible process. So once NAD gives up those electrons in one of the chemical reactions in the later stages of cellular respiration, that molecule can be recycled. NAD is reduced to form NADH, and then NADH is oxidized and returns to the form of NAD, so it can carry electrons again. So we see this exchange from one form, NAD, to the form of NADH simply by the movement of electrons. And that you'll see later that this becomes an important process in the events of cellular respiration. So understanding redox reactions, electron carriers, and the role of ATP are central to our understanding of cellular respiration. I want to make sure that you have a firm grasp on those concepts as we move into the specific events of cellular respiration. Now, when I say cellular respiration, for the most part, generally, we're speaking about aerobic respiration. But I want to point out that the term cellular respiration also includes both anaerobic and aerobic respiration. It's just that more frequently we're going to see the steps or processes of aerobic. And also another point I wanted to make is that although we focus mostly on the oxidation of glucose, this process could involve fats or proteins that are consumed as fuels as well. There are three big events in the process of cellular respiration. Listed in order of their occurrence, first there's glycolysis. If you look at that word glycolysis, this is the lysing or breaking of glucose into two pyruvate molecules. The second big event in cellular respiration is the citric acid cycle. In this cycle, there's the completion of the breakdown of glucose. This cycle could also be called the tricarboxylic acid cycle. It gets that name from the fact that citric acid, which is one of its first products, is actually a tricarboxylic acid. So sometimes it's called the TCA cycle. It could also be named after one of the Nobel laureates that helped establish the pathway, and that's Hans Adolf Krebs. And so sometimes you'll hear it referred to as the Krebs cycle. Either way, whichever name is used for the process, it's still the same set of events, the breakdown of glucose. And then the third big event is the oxidative phosphorylation. And that's really where we get the bulk of the ATP produced that's going to result from the oxidation of the glucose molecule. So now that we've introduced this topic, hopefully you can come up with an AP level answer for why do we have to eat. As you think about your answer, you may want to write it down. Be ready to share it out loud. I'd like for you to include in your answer ATP, energy transfer, oxidation, and reduction as you describe why do we have to eat. Hopefully your answer sounds something like, we eat to provide the organic compounds which contain the energy that was captured from the sun by autotrophs. And through a series of oxidation reduction reactions, we transfer that solar energy from its chemical storage form to the bonds of phosphate in ATP so that that can serve as our cell's energy currency. That's why you have to eat. Next time we'll look at that process in a little more detail.